RMS Titanic was a British passenger liner, operated by the White Star Line, which sank in the North Atlantic Ocean on 15 April 1912 after striking an iceberg during her maiden voyage from Southampton to New York City. Of the estimated 2,224 passengers and crew aboard, more than 1,500 died, making it the deadliest sinking of a single ship up to that time. RMS Titanic was the largest ship afloat at the time she entered service, and the first-class accommodation was designed to be the pinnacle of comfort and luxury, with a gymnasium, swimming pool, smoking rooms, high-class restaurants and cafes, a Turkish bath and hundreds of opulent cabins. Titanic had advanced safety features, such as watertight compartments and remotely activated watertight doors, contributing to its reputation as unsinkable. She was built by the Harland & Wolff shipyard in Belfast. Thomas Andrews, the chief naval architect, and under the command of Captain Edward Smith, who went down with the ship. Titanic was 882 feet 9 inches long with a maximum breadth of 92 feet 6 inches. Her total height, measured from the base of the keel to the top of the bridge, was 104 feet. Titanic was equipped with 16 lifeboat davits, each capable of lowering 3 lifeboats, for a total of 48 boats. She carried only 20 lifeboats, 4 of which were collapsible and proved hard to launch while she was sinking. The maiden voyage began at noon, as scheduled. Titanic received a series of warnings from other ships of drifting ice in the area of the Grand Banks of Newfoundland, but Captain Smith ignored them. One of the ships to warn Titanic was the Atlantic Line's Mesaba. Nevertheless, the ship continued to steam at full speed, which was standard practice at the time. Although the ship was not trying to set a speed record, timekeeping was a priority, and under prevailing maritime practices, ships were often operated at close to full speed. Ice warnings were seen as advisories, and reliance was placed upon lookouts and the watch on the bridge. It was generally believed that ice posed little danger to large vessels. Close calls with ice were not uncommon, and even head-on collisions had not been disastrous. At 11:40 p.m. on the 14th of April, lookout Frederick Fleet spotted an iceberg immediately ahead of Titanic and alerted the bridge. First Officer William Murdoch ordered the ship to be steered around the obstacle and the engines to be reversed, but it was too late. The starboard side of Titanic struck the iceberg, creating a series of holes below the waterline. The hull was not punctured by the iceberg, but rather dented such that the hull's seams buckled and separated, allowing water to rush in. 5 of the ship's watertight compartments were breached. It soon became clear that the ship was doomed, as she could not survive more than 4 compartments being flooded. Titanic began sinking bow first, with water spilling from compartment to compartment as her angle in the water became steeper. Those aboard Titanic were ill-prepared for such an emergency. In accordance with accepted practices of the time, as ships were seen as largely unsinkable and lifeboats were intended to transfer passengers to nearby rescue vessels, Titanic only had enough lifeboats to carry about half of those on board. If the ship had carried her full complement of about 3,339 passengers and crew, only about a third could have been accommodated in the lifeboats. The crew had not been trained adequately in carrying out an evacuation. The officers did not know how many they could safely put aboard the lifeboats and launched many of them barely half full. Third-class passengers were largely left to fend for themselves, causing many of them to become trapped below decks as the ship filled with water. The "women and children first" protocol was generally followed when loading the lifeboats, and most of the male passengers and crew were left aboard. Women and children survived at rates of about 75% and 50%. Respectively, while only 20% of men survived. Between 2:10 and 2:15 a.m., a little over 2.5 hours after Titanic struck the iceberg, her rate of sinking suddenly increased as the boat deck dipped underwater, and the sea poured in through open hatches and grates. As her unsupported stern rose out of the water, exposing the propellers, the ship broke in 2 main pieces between the second and third funnels, due to the immense forces on the keel. With the bow underwater, and air trapped in the stern remained afloat and buoyant for a few minutes longer, rising to a nearly vertical angle with hundreds of people still clinging to it, before foundering at 2:20 a.m. It was long generally believed the ship sank in one piece, but the discovery of the wreck many years later revealed that the ship had broken fully in 2. All remaining passengers and crew were immersed in lethally cold water with a temperature of -2°C. Sudden immersion into freezing water typically causes death within minutes, either from cardiac arrest, uncontrollable breathing of water, or cold incapacitation, and almost all of those in the water died of cardiac arrest or other bodily reactions to freezing water within 15 to 30 minutes. Only 5 of them were helped into the lifeboats, though the lifeboats had room for almost 500 more people. Distress signals were sent by wireless, rockets, and LAMP, but none of the ships that responded were near enough to reach Titanic before she sank. A radio operator on board SS Burma, for instance, estimated that it would be 6 a.m. before the liner could arrive at the scene. Meanwhile, SS Californian, which was the last to have been in contact before the collision, saw Titanic's flares but failed to assist. Around 4 a.m., RMS Carpathia arrived on the scene in response to Titanic's earlier distress calls. When the ship sank, many of the lifeboats that had been lowered were only filled up to an average of 60%. 706 people survived the disaster and were conveyed by Carpathia to New York, Titanic's original destination, and 1,517 people died. The number of casualties of the sinking is unclear, due to a number of factors. These include confusion over the passenger list, which included some names of people who canceled their trip at the last minute, and the fact that several passengers traveled under aliases for various reasons and were therefore double counted on the casualty lists. The death toll has been put at between 1,490 and 1,635 people. A number of expeditions were mounted to find Titanic, but it was not until the 1st of September 1985 that a Franco-American expedition led by Jean-Louis Michel and Robert Ballard succeeded. The team discovered that Titanic had in fact split apart, probably near or at the surface, before sinking to the seabed. The separated bow and stern sections lie about 1/3 of a mile apart in Titanic Canyon off the coast of Newfoundland.